Ever imagine software being built like a fortress, secure right from the foundation?
That's the idea behind the secure software development lifecycle.
The SDL, we're going deep on this today, using that document you sent over.
487 SDL stages, PDF.pdf.
Right, that one. So it's not just slapping on security measures at the end, right?
No, it's about integrating security into every single step of the way, from that first idea all the way to, well, years after the software is released.
Makes sense. So even if you're not a techie, if you use software, which is pretty much everyone.
This deep dives for you. It helps you understand the work that goes into making the software we use every day truly secure.
It's like you don't think about all the effort that goes into building a safe house, right? You just know it's solid.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's break down this SDL. It starts with, what is it? Security assessment.
Right, and this is where we get into the fun stuff. We're thinking about security before we even write a single line of code.
So like a detective stopping a crime before it even happens. I'm curious, though, what's the hardest part about getting everyone on board with security this early?
It can be a challenge, you're right. Sometimes developers might see security as this extra thing they have to do, something that slows them down.
Sure.
Or management might be focused on getting the product out the door quickly, especially when, deadlines are tight, and security can take a back seat.
Yeah, I can see that happening. So how do you get everyone on the same page then?
Communication is key. I can't stress that enough. It's not just about telling people what to do.
Uh-huh.
You have to explain why security is so important. Give them real-world examples. Show them what happens when security is an afterthought, like data breaches, system failures, you name it.
I see. So paint a picture of the consequences.
Exactly. When people understand what's at stake, they're much more likely to get on board.
Makes sense. So once everyone's convinced, what does this early assessment actually look like?
Well, first things first, we bring the whole software team to the table from the very beginning. Developers, designers, project managers, everyone.
Everyone has a voice.
Everyone. Then we figure out what we're trying to protect and what could go wrong. What are the threats?
So almost like a brainstorming session where everyone's wearing a detective hat?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And from that, we create a comprehensive risk assessment. We analyze potential weaknesses and how those weaknesses could be exploited. Then we figure out the impact each risk could have.
So not just what could go wrong, but how likely it is and how bad it would be.
Exactly. All of this comes together in something called a security milestone plan. It's basically a roadmap for how we'll handle security throughout the project.
Like a security blueprint.
You got it. We also create a risk assessment report that outlines all the risks we've identified. This keeps everyone informed and working towards the same security goals.
Love it. So that's security assessment. What's next?
Next comes the architecture phase.
Okay, so if security assessment is like coming up with a plan for a fortress, is architecture drawing up the blueprints?
I like that analogy. Just like you wouldn't build a house without blueprints, you shouldn't build software without a strong architectural design.
Right.
This means creating detailed diagrams. These show all the parts of the software, how they connect, and how data flows through the system.
So it's not just the code itself, it's how everything is organized and fits together.
Precisely. And when you have a well-defined architecture, it's a lot easier to find those potential security weaknesses. This is also where we start threat modeling.
Threat modeling, huh? That sounds serious. What is that exactly?
It's a way to systematically identify and analyze potential threats. There are different ways to do it, but one common one is the STRIDE framework.
Stride.
It stands for spoofing identity, tampering with data, repudiation, which is basically denying actions,
Okay.
information disclosure, denial of service, and elevation of privilege.
Wow, that's quite a list. So how would you use Stride, like in a real-world scenario?
Let's say you're building an online banking app. Using STRIDE, you might find a potential threat under spoofing. Like someone could create a fake login page to steal user information.
Ah, so you're basically trying to think like the bad guys to stay one step ahead.
You got it. Threat modeling is like a stress test for your software design.
Makes sense. So once you've found all these potential threats, what happens then?
We document everything. All the potential threats and how we plan to address them. That's our threat model documentation. Then the development team and security experts get together to review the design, making sure it's strong enough to withstand those potential attacks.
That's the architectural design review you mentioned earlier?
Exactly. It's like a double check to make sure those blueprints are solid and secure.
Got it. So we've done our security assessment, we've got our blueprints, and now
Now we can move on to the actual building process, design and development.
time to start writing some code.
Yes, but even the coding process is done with security in mind. Think of it like a master craftsman choosing the right tools and techniques for the job.
So it's not just about what the code does, but how it's written.
Exactly. That's where secure coding guidelines come in. Think of them as best practices for writing code that's less vulnerable to attack. A rule book for creating strong, resilient code.
Okay, that makes sense. But even with the best guidelines, people make mistakes, right?
Yeah.
How do you ensure developers are actually following the rules and writing secure code?
We have tools for that. We use static analysis tools. Think of them like spell checkers, but for code.
Oh,
They automatically scan the code as it's being written and flag any potential security issues.
like having a security expert looking over your shoulder as you code.
Precisely. These tools are great because they can spot vulnerabilities early on. Saves a lot of time and headaches later.
Makes sense. So you don't need a huge budget or a team of security gurus to start using these tools.
Not at all. And all the code that's written, along with the results of those scans, are stored in a secure code repository. We also have a vulnerability report that lists any issues we found and what their status is.
So it's like a secure library of code where everything is carefully checked and documented.
Exactly. But even with secure code, we're not done yet. The different parts of the software need to work together securely too.
So like making sure all the parts of a machine fit together perfectly and function safely.
That's a great analogy. And that's where testing comes in. In this next stage of design and development, we put the software through the ringer, trying to break it to find any hidden weaknesses.
You're basically trying to hack your own software.
You got it. We do things like unit testing, where we test individual components for security flaws. Then there's integration testing, where we see how all the different pieces work together and make sure those interactions are secure.
So we're building a secure house, making sure all the plumbing and electrical work perfectly, and then stress testing the entire structure.
Exactly. And beyond the automated testing, we also do peer code reviews. Developers check each other's code, looking for anything that might have slipped through the cracks. It's like having a second set of eyes.
So a very collaborative process, everyone working together to build secure software.
Absolutely. All the results from these tests are documented in test case results, and we keep track of issues from code reviews in the peer review documentation.
Wow, so by the time you get through this design and development phase, you've tested everything every which way.
You could say that, but we're not done yet. There's one final stage before we can release the software to the world.
This is where you find out if all that hard work paid off, right?
You could say that. This stage is called ship.
Ship.
Yeah, or A5 in the SDL.
Yeah.
It's like the final countdown before launching a rocket into space. We do one last super thorough check to make sure the software is truly ready.
So what exactly happens during this ship stage?
Well, we conduct final vulnerability scans and penetration tests. This is where ethical hackers try to break into the software to find any remaining weaknesses.
So you're hiring professional hackers to try and hack your own system.
Exactly. It's the best way to make sure your defenses are up to par.
Makes sense.
We also make sure the software meets all the relevant regulations and licensing agreements.
So like a final inspection to make sure everything's up to code. Literally. What do you absolutely need to have before shipping?
Two key things: a final security report summarizing all the testing and what we found, and compliance certification, proving that the software meets all the necessary requirements. These show that the software has been thoroughly vetted.
So you're saying we've done our homework and this software is secure.
Exactly. But launching the software is really just the beginning. It's like launching a satellite. You can't just send it up and forget about it.
Yeah.
You have to monitor it, make adjustments, deal with any issues that pop up.
So the work never really ends.
Not when it comes to security. The last stage of the SDL is post-release support. It's all about maintenance and staying vigilant.
You're always on high alert looking out for potential problems.
That's right. We have to be constantly watching for new vulnerabilities because threats are always evolving. It's like having a security guard on duty 24/7.
So we've been digging into this secure software development lifecycle, the SDL.
I gotta say, I'm kind of blown away by all the work that goes into making secure software.
It's definitely a lot more involved than most people realize. But like we were saying before, even with the SDL, there are always challenges, bumps in the road.
For sure. So, what are some of the biggest hurdles you've run into trying to implement the SDL?
Well, one of the biggest ones is getting everyone on board with this whole security mindset. It's not just about, telling people to follow the rules.
Right.
Security has to become part of the team's culture. It's got to be in their DNA.
It's a culture shift, not just a technical
You
process.
got it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll have developers who see security as this extra thing they got to do, something that slows them down. Or, management might prioritize speed over security, especially when deadlines are looming.
Yeah, got to get that product out the door.
Exactly. It's a balancing act for sure.
I bet. So how do you convince people that security is worth the effort, especially when they're feeling that time crunch? You got to make it real for them. Instead of throwing around technical jargon, show them what can actually happen if security is neglected.
Okay.
Talk about those high-profile beta breaches, those system failures
Mhm.
that made the news, the stuff that could have been prevented.
So a little bit of scare tactics, but in a good way.
I'd say it's more like a reality check.
Okay, yeah.
When people understand the consequences, the financial losses, the damage to their reputation, maybe even legal issues, they start paying attention.
Yeah, it's kind of like you don't think about a fire extinguisher until you actually need one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Another big challenge is keeping up with the constantly changing threat landscape. I mean, new vulnerabilities are popping up all the time.
Right.
So teams need to be continuously learning, adapting their security practices.
Like an endless game of cat and mouse with the bad guys.
Pretty much. That's
Yeah.
why it's so crucial to have ongoing training, professional development for your team. They need to stay up to date on the latest threats, the best practices, and of course, the tools.
Speaking of tools, there's a whole world of security software out there. How do you even know where to begin?
It can be overwhelming, that's for sure. You've got tools for everything. Automated vulnerability scanning, penetration testing, you name it. But the key is to choose the right tools for your specific needs and your budget.
So you don't need to buy every shiny new gadget that comes out.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
It's more about understanding your own vulnerabilities and finding tools that can help you address them effectively. And, you got to make sure the tools work well with your existing development process.
Yeah, you don't want to create more problems than you're solving.
Exactly. Too much complexity can backfire.
Okay, so you've got the tools, your team's on board. What else can trip people up when they're trying to put the SDL into practice?
Sometimes people forget about the human element. The tools are great, but they're not going to solve everything. At the end of the day, security comes down to people making smart decisions and following those best practices we talked about.
So it's not just about the technology, it's about the people using it.
Exactly. That's why building a culture of security is so important. You need to create an environment where everyone feels comfortable speaking up about potential risks.
Yeah.
An environment where they feel empowered to think about security and contribute to making things better.
So security becomes everyone's responsibility, not just the security team's job.
That's right. When security is embedded in the company culture, it becomes a natural part of the development process, not an afterthought.
Yeah, that makes sense. But changing a company's culture is not exactly a walk in the park, right? How do you even begin to shift things like that?
Well, it starts at the top. If the leaders are truly committed to security, that commitment will filter down throughout the whole organization.
Okay.
And the training can't be boring. It has to be engaging and relevant, not just another box to tick on a compliance checklist.
So make it fun, make it relatable, and make it clear that everyone has a stake in security.
Exactly. When you approach security in a positive and proactive way, it becomes less of a burden and more of a shared goal. That's when you start to see real change.
This has been super insightful. It really seems like putting the SDL into practice is as much about the people and the culture as it is about the technical stuff.
It absolutely is.
Right.
It's about changing how people think about security, breaking down those walls between departments, and getting everyone on the same page.
So it's about moving away from reacting to problems after they happen and towards preventing them in the first place.
You got it. And when security becomes a core part of how an organization operates, it's no longer seen as a roadblock. It's seen as a vital part of building great software.
I like that. So we've talked about the challenges, but what about the good stuff? What are the benefits of actually making the SDL work?
Well, for starters, you significantly reduce the risk of those costly security incidents.
Hmm.
Data breaches, system outages, those can really hurt, both financially and reputation-wise.
Hmm.
But when you build security in from the beginning, you're creating a system that's much tougher to crack.
So it's like an insurance policy for your software.
I like that analogy. Another benefit is that it builds trust with your customers. In this day and age, people are really concerned about their privacy and their data.
Absolutely.
When you show them that you take security seriously, they're more likely to trust you and your products.
That makes sense. People want to know their information is safe.
Exactly. And then there are the regulations. In some industries, complying with security standards isn't just a good idea, it's the law. The SDL can help organizations meet those requirements and avoid those big fines and penalties.
So it's not just about protecting your reputation and your customers, but also staying on the right side of the law.
You got it. And beyond all the practical benefits, there's also that feeling of satisfaction that comes with building something secure. Knowing you're creating software that's both functional and safe, that's a great feeling.
Like the pride a craftsperson feels when they build a beautiful and sturdy piece of furniture.
Exactly. And that pride, it translates into a better product, a happier team, and a more secure online world for everyone.
This has been a really eye-opening conversation. I'm starting to understand why the SDL is so valuable for building secure software.
It's not a perfect solution, but it's definitely a powerful tool for creating a more secure and resilient digital world.
So before we move on, I'm curious about the future of the SDL. What trends are you seeing? What challenges are on the horizon?
That's a great question. One trend that's gaining traction is the shift towards DevSecOps.
DevSecOps. That rings a bell. Isn't that connected to the whole Agile and DevOps thing?
Exactly. DevSecOps builds on those principles of fast development cycles and continuous delivery.
So instead of security being this separate phase at the end, it's woven into every part of the process.
You got it. With DevSecOps, everyone's responsible for security, and it's addressed continuously throughout the whole development lifecycle.
So it's like taking those SDL principles and baking them even more deeply into the way software is built.
Exactly. It's all about automating security processes, integrating security tools right into the development pipeline, and giving developers the power to own security.
That makes a lot of sense. It seems like a natural next step for the SDL adapting to the faster pace of software development these days.
It is. And as software becomes more complex and interconnected, we're going to need even stronger security practices. DevSecOps is a way to tackle those challenges and foster a culture of shared responsibility, continuous improvement.
This is all super fascinating, but gotta admit, it's a lot to process. For our listeners who are feeling inspired to learn more, where's a good place to start?
There are so many amazing resources out there, both online and offline. A great starting point is the OWASP Foundation.
Oh, WASP. I've heard that name before.
It stands for the Open Web Application Security Project. They're a nonprofit focused on improving software security.
Okay.
Their website is a goldmine of free resources, including their famous OWASP Top 10 list, which breaks down the most critical web application security risks.
So that's like the common traps to watch out for.
Exactly. They also offer training courses, certifications, and have this amazing community of security professionals who love to share their knowledge.
Sounds like a great resource. Any other organizations or websites you recommend?
Absolutely. The SANS Institute is another excellent one. They have tons of security training and certifications. And if you're more of a hands-on learner, there are online platforms where you can do interactive coding challenges and security exercises.
Oh, that sounds like fun. Learning by doing, right?
Yeah, I got it. Platforms like HackerRank and Hack the Box give you a safe environment to practice your hacking skills and learn about vulnerabilities.
So you don't need to be a master hacker to give it a shot.
Not at all. A lot of these platforms are great for beginners. They have challenges for all skill levels. It's a fantastic way to develop that security mindset and get some real-world experience.
I might have to check those out myself. What about books or conferences? Any must-reads or must-attend events for security folks?
Definitely. The Web Application Hacker's Handbook is a classic. It covers a wide range of web security topics.
Okay.
Building secure and reliable systems is another excellent resource that focuses on integrating security into the whole software development lifecycle.
I'm adding those to my reading list for sure. What about conferences?
Well, Black Hat and DEF CON are two of the biggest and most well-known security conferences out there. They have talks by leading experts, hands-on workshops, and it's a great opportunity to connect with other security pros.
Sounds amazing. Though maybe a little intimidating for a newbie.
Don't worry, there are also lots of smaller regional conferences that are perfect for beginners. Look for events organized by local security groups or universities. They often have a more welcoming and relaxed atmosphere.
So there's really something out there for everyone, regardless of their experience level.
Exactly. Just be curious, keep learning, and don't be shy about asking questions. The security community is generally super welcoming and helpful.
That's great to hear. It's inspiring to see how passionate people are about making software more secure.
It's an important mission, and it takes all of us working together. The more people we have on board, the better.
Absolutely. So we've covered a lot of ground today, but I want to shift gears a bit and talk about what individuals can do to make the digital world safer. I know it can feel like such a massive problem. Can everyday people really make a difference?
That's a great question, and the answer is absolutely yes. We all have a part to play in building a more secure online world.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the secure software development lifecycle. It's been fascinating to learn about all the work that goes into keeping the software we use every day safe.
Absolutely. It's a hidden world that most people don't even think about,
hmm
but it's critical, especially as our lives become more and more reliant on software.
Yeah, you've given us a lot to think about, from those early security assessments to that ongoing post-release support. But before we wrap up, I'm curious, what can individuals do, to make the digital world a little bit safer? It feels like such a big problem. Can everyday people really make a difference?
Absolutely. We all have a role to play in promoting that culture of security.
Okay, so where do we start? What are some simple things people can do right now to improve their own security?
Well, one of the most important things is to practice good password hygiene. Using strong, unique passwords for all your online accounts. And consider a password manager.
Oh, yeah. I know I'm guilty of using the same password for multiple accounts. It's just so much easier to remember.
I hear you. But it's a big risk. If one of those accounts gets compromised, all your accounts using that password are vulnerable too.
Okay, point taken. Strong, unique passwords it is. What else?
Be wary of phishing scams. Those emails or messages that try to trick you into giving up your personal information, always double-check the sender's address. Look for any suspicious links and never click on anything or download anything from a sender you don't recognize.
It's incredible how sophisticated those scams have gotten. Some of them look so real.
They do. Those scammers are getting better and better at making their stuff look like legitimate websites or emails.
So yeah, it's best to be super cautious.
Absolutely. And another important step is to keep your software updated. Those updates usually include security patches that fix known vulnerabilities, so make sure you're installing them as soon as they're available.
So don't ignore those little update notifications that pop up.
Exactly. They're there for a reason. They help protect you from malware and other threats.
All right, so strong passwords, be careful what you click on, and keep things updated. Got it. What about when we're choosing apps or websites? Is there anything we can look for to make sure they're secure?
One thing to look for is websites that use HTTPS.
HTTPS.
Yeah, that's a secure version of HTTP. You
Yeah.
can tell if a site's using it because there'll be a little padlock icon in the address bar.
So HTTPS is good, HTTP, not so much.
Pretty much. HTTPS encrypts the information sent between your browser and the website, so it's harder for attackers to steal your data.
Okay, that makes sense. And I guess reading privacy policies is a good idea too, even if they're super long and boring.
Yeah, I know those privacy policies can be a pain to read, but it's worth it. It's important to understand how companies are using and sharing your data.
Right, because the more you know, the better decisions you can make.
Exactly. And if you're not sure about a website's security, don't hesitate to contact their customer support and ask questions.
Good point. Be informed, be proactive, and don't be afraid to ask. That's great advice.
And remember, security is everyone's responsibility. The more we do to protect ourselves and each other, the safer we'll all be.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive into the world of secure software development. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
My pleasure. I hope our listeners learned a lot about the importance of building secure software and how they can help make the digital world a safer place.
I'm sure they have. And for those who want to dive in even deeper, we'll be sure to include links to all those great resources we talked about in the show notes.
Sounds good.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive. To all our listeners, thanks for joining us on this journey. Remember, security is an ongoing process, not a one-time thing. Keep learning, stay curious, and together we can make the digital world a safer place for everyone.